And it will be a stream?
Yes, it will be streamed to our YouTube channel, if you don't mind.
Okay. And it will be a stream?
Yes, it will be streamed to our YouTube channel, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Sorry. So we are starting to get some of the participants, like here, they're starting to join. So I will be letting them join us through my own computer, and I guess you're going to join here.
So do we start at 5?
Yes. Would you like me to introduce you?
Mike.
So, what do you probably remember, Olga?
Oh, yes, I remember.
Yeah, so Olga is the dean of our faculty.
Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, Ulrika. Nice to meet you, Claire. We haven't met before, but I've heard about you, a lot about you. I doubt that Claire can hear us. Anyway. How's life?
What?
How's life?
Oh, life. Life is okay. We have very nice winter view here. Snow on the trees.
Ah.
You know, in Voronezh, no snow.
No snow in Voronezh. No.
No, what is it?
Yeah. I don't know why. Probably the God doesn't like us. Doesn't bring us snow. No snow. But we still hope that sooner or later we will have snow. By Christmas time, you know.
I understand. Well, a new year without snow, it's for Russian people not so nice.
Bad news, or bad sign, I would even say. Are you going to do it in English or in Russian? In English.
She asked me to do it in English.
In English, okay.
But I can't speak freely in English, so I must read it.
Sure.
No problem.
Yeah.
And you can, if you think I'm over the limit, you must stop me, okay? Because
am I supposed to do it, or Sonia is the right person to do it? She says that she can easily stop you.
Okay.
I don't think I am in the position to stop you.
Oh. I have no impression how what is the information level about RT in the audience. What do you think? What course the students from what course they are, from the second?
There are some students who are doing their masters.
Oh, masters.
Yes, some of them are doing the bachelors, the undergraduates. Some of our participants are professionals, lecturers, or associate professors at the university. A couple of them are PhD students. You know, yeah, various categories of participants. Ну, можно
So it's, what do you think? It's okay when I started in my part a small historical part about how RT Germany began to start work in the 2014, or it's not necessary?
It's okay. I mean, if it's not long, right? How it all began.
Ромашку почему не купила в аптеке?
I wonder if we start at 5. Do we start at 5? We start at 5? My students think that they start at 5:30.
No, they don't, because they received the letter.
They called me and told me that we start at 5:30. That's the point. Sorry?
They received an apology letter.
They received an apology letter. What does it mean?
That means that I screwed up.
Алло. Настя, добрый. Я в процессе, поскольку мы начинаем все-таки в 5. Да. Ну, в том-то и дело, что я не знаю, как это случилось, но у нас все I think that most of the students and professionals who have registered and who have chosen to join this meeting are here. So let us start our meeting. And I'm happy to welcome all those who have joined us today. Young specialists, our students, undergraduates, and those who major in a master's degree, and more experienced professionals like lecturers and professors of Voronezh State University, who have also decided to be with us and who are interested in searching for common ground between the Europeans and the Russian, and searching for understanding. I don't want to sound pessimistic and say that I don't believe in understanding. Of course I do. But what I also believe in is that to understand, people have to or should be willing to understand. I mean, both parties who are involved or which are involved in the interaction or discussion should be willing to understand each other or one another. Well, there's no understanding without this willingness to do this. And this is actually our our key issue today. Today, we have Claire Daly and Ulrich Hayden to share their ideas and opinions about these issues. We also have Voronezh State University students who are the experts in this point and who will also share their ideas with us. Let me introduce our first invited speaker, Claire Daly, a member of the European Parliament from Ireland, representing Independence for Change and the left group in the European Parliament. First of all, I should say thank you. We're really grateful, Claire, that you have decided to join us, that you have found time in your schedule. And all time is yours. So could you please start sharing your ideas with us?
Thanks very much, and I hope you can hear me and see me well.
Yes,
Great. The honor is all mine. I'm often told to go back to Russia. I've never been to Russia, so I can't go back there, but I would very much have liked to be with you in person. So to be here in a substitute in a webinar is a great privilege for me. So thank you so much for the invitation. It's obviously 2021 and press freedoms are under attack all over the world. We have the murder of journalists, intimidation and censorship, strategic lawsuits against public participation and so on. And I think against that background, probably the biggest single case of persecution of a journalism, which shows to me the problem worldwide, is the case of Julian Assange, the WikiLeaks founder, who is being prosecuted by the United States government, who are currently trying to extradite him from the United Kingdom. And this is the defining press freedom case, really, of a generation. So why do I start there? And why is this case so important? Well, first, I think it is uniquely visible. I mean, in 2010, Julian Assange was probably the most famous journalist in the world when he and WikiLeaks published thousands of documents from the United States exposing war crimes by the US military in Afghanistan and Iraq and exposing the reality of that conflict. At the time, he was celebrated the world over as a sort of a heroic figure who had stood up to the world's most powerful country, revealing its dirty secrets. And, you know, we have to be clear about this and put it into perspective. I mean, the United States likes to pretend that it is a champion of human rights and democracy. We hear from the new president, Joe Biden, that he has unveiled a new initiative to support what he calls unfettered and independent media. And yet, this is the country which is prosecuting the world's most famous journalist for the crime of espionage, with the whole world watching. So, you know, to me, that reveals more than anything its lack of credibility in talking about press freedoms and fundamental rights. And it also exposes the European Union, who slavishly just follow the US lead. Now, this case has done huge damage to press freedom internationally. The spectacle of Assange, a journalist charged for journalism, detained first in the embassy in London, then in a London high security prison while his health was deteriorating, and facing years of litigation, and then 175 years in a US prison if he is convicted. And a lot of people talk about the chilling effect of this case if he is successfully prosecuted. For me, the chilling effect is already here. It's already the situation, because by threatening Assange, they are trying to silence journalists the world over and prevent them from scrutinizing US activity on the world stage. And because, as we know, the US likes to put itself as a sort of forward, as some sort of a global leader for some reason, but the fact that they are taking this prosecution lowers the global standard for protection for press freedom on national security journalism. And we already see the US being followed by the UK, accelerating its draconian official secrets legislation, which is already there, introducing that into the new sphere. We see in the European Union all sorts of silencing of debate and coverage under the guise of disinformation, which is the new buzzword. And the European Union never stops talking and wailing about authoritarian regimes, which they define as maybe Russia or China or Iran or whoever, their so-called official enemies and so on. And yet they themselves defend press freedom. But the reality is that under the guise of disinformation, they are shutting down dialogue and dissent, even within the European Union, which I think is highly ironic. If you take the situation now, there is a committee here in the Parliament called the Committee on Foreign Interference in Affairs of the European Union. And one of their conclusions, which has no basis whatsoever in any evidence, is that Russia interfered with the Brexit referendum and is basically responsible for the UK leaving the European Union. Now, there has been independent scrutiny of this issue by the UK Information Commissioner, hardly a radical organisation, they are a British state organisation, which has found no evidence for this whatsoever. And yet this fallacy is introduced into a report of the European Union as fact. So what we have now in the European Union is sort of conventional wisdom, tit for tat sort of idle gossip being presented without any evidence whatsoever, but taken as a credible expression of reality, which is an incredibly dangerous territory to be in. It's nice for the people in power that they can hide behind this situation. It's not the fault of the failure of economic policies or the failure of the European Union that led to British people deciding to rule. No, no, no. It's the big bad wolf on the outside. It's that unknown enemy. It's Russian interference. And it's so much cleaner to have that reality, because the people in power who are actually responsible are then not responsible. And that's the backdrop to what we're having this discussion in. And I think any credibility that the European Union would have in lecturing any other country about, press freedoms is completely lost when you look at the case of Julian Assange, because what is being attempted there is a legal precedent, essentially transforming the legal reality under which journalists work. Because the US indictment says that the acts which are to be criminalized, which this WikiLeaks journalist exposed evidence of US war crimes, nothing else, that's the only thing in the indictment. He's charged with processing that material, sharing it with other journalists, in other words, being part of an historic expose of, or a scoop exposing war crimes. And traditionally, the so-called US First Amendment, which would, we are told, you know, the great champions of democracy and human rights and civil liberties, that would protect journalists. But of course, it doesn't, because that's now being called espionage. And it would be bad enough if that was being done in the United States against Americans. But actually, as you know, Assange is not American, he's Australian. And the journalism that he did was done in the EU at that time. The UK was part of the EU, and he has been extradited from the UK. So actually what we have is the United States pursuing a new precedent to apply extraterritorially to the whole world, not just its territory. It wants journalists everywhere to be prevented from exposing US war crimes, to keep them a secret, and to protect US interests. Now, the situation is beginning to change a little bit. The coverage in the media is getting a little bit better, but actually we have to ask ourselves, well, why hasn't the case been presented fairly before now? Well, you know, look, at best, there has been disinformation on the case, you know, damaging his reputation and so on. At worst, they just ignore it and say nothing. And I think if we're engaged in a discussion about how you protect press freedoms, I think we need to look at why is that the case. I mean, is it the case that it was a conscious decision on the part of newspapers and broadcasters to filter information and to consciously shape the agenda? I don't think that's the case. I think actually Assange himself answers this issue, and I think it's a bit illuminating. In a talk that he gave with Google's chairman in 2011, he talked about a censorship pyramid to explain how censorship exists in societies all over the world. And his model shows really the sophistication of his thinking about the role of the press in every society, and a general theory about how information is suppressed, how information is managed or shaped by the institutions that exist in any society. Now, I have a graph of his pyramid, which I am technologically illiterate, so I can't put it up on the screen, but I will email it later on, because I think it's a very good example of the most visible, you know, in his model, he talks about the most visible cases of press repression being sort of assassination and imprisonment and so on. They're at the top of the pyramid, but actually they're the rarest form of censorship. You know, they're so egregious that they're highly visible. But as you proceed down the pyramid, it widens, really meaning that the severity of the cases decreases, but their numbers is absolutely rampant. So what we have is more and more, I suppose, of the same information or censorship being churned out, and that then shaping a worldview. The cases are also include, say, self-censorship, and he himself made the point, and to quote him, that there are the most vast forms of self-censorship that are concerned about missing out on business deals, missing out on promotions. They're even more significant because they're lower down the pyramid. At the very bottom, which is the largest volume, is all of those people who cannot read, who do not have access to print, who do not have access to vast communications, or where there is no profitable industry in providing that. So what Assange was doing that time, over 10 years ago, was attempting to understand how accurate information is prevented from circulating in our countries and our societies. And I think we have a very good example of that in the way in which Russia and China are presently being portrayed in Europe. We are manufacturing a viewpoint of the official enemy, which benefits nobody in Europe, but it's put forward in a sort of an unquestioning way by many journalists. And you would ask, well, why are they doing that when it is such nonsense, when many of the stories and the examples being thrown out there are so pathetic? They are so without evidence that it's like a children's sort of, nightmare nursery rhyme of the big bad wolf out there, but it has no content or merit to it. And to me, the problem is structural, because even though the press in liberal democracies is thought to be free and independent, there is a huge concentration of the mainstream media in Western countries in private hands. We're talking about billionaire ownership of media and broadcast outlets. So they're not free. Just because they're not in state control doesn't mean that they're free. They're there to protect the interests of the society that is there at the moment. And those interests then are reflected in editorial lines, in the emphasis of the coverage, in the things that are omitted. It's not even that journalists are told what to write. They self-censor themselves because they know that's not where the money is going to go, their career advancement and so on. I mean, I've been actually shocked at how much the situation has deteriorated in the past period. Myself and my colleague, Mick Wallace, who's also in the European Parliament with me, we were members of the Irish Parliament for 8 years. And we would often make many statements. We were very vocal against the US military using our airport because we are supposed to be a neutral country. We would be, people would say, oh, you're pro-Russian. We're not pro anything. We're pro-peace. We want everybody to live along with their neighbours. We want diplomatic solutions. And actually, the only agenda that is being furthered at the moment is the military-industrial complex. And we have a situation where the European Union has moved now for the first time to having direct expenditure of defence and military hardware. It's a new departure. It was never supposed to be, and you have to feed the beast. So to legitimize the amount of money going on this, then you have to have an official enemy, as it were. And without any evidence, Russia and increasingly China, because the racism against China is absolutely unrelenting, is being pushed. So this has become a sort of a self-censorship in the interests of capitalism, in the interests of the ruling elites in the various countries across Europe, because you can be absolutely sure that the people of Europe do not benefit from this situation at all. They're the victims of it. The people of Europe who, like everywhere in the world, are suffering the pandemic would much prefer the money to be spent on health and housing than on militarism. But that is the direction in which we are going now. So, I mean, to me, it's great that you are hosting this session today. It's sad that it's taking place while I'm in Strasbourg, and we have tomorrow the daughter of Navalny getting an award, oh my God, for the Sakharov Prize for freedom of expression or something. But I wouldn't worry about it too much, because all of the other winners have been absolutely appalling as well and have nothing to do with freedom of expression or freedom of journalism. If the European Union cared about freedom of expression and free journalism, the award would be going to Julian Assange for his just incredible role in just showing that journalism can be such a positive, that it can hold power to account. And for that crime, he's the one facing potentially a lifetime in prison. So the fact that he is not being honoured here, to me, more than anything, exposes the myth that is the European Union, and also shows to me the importance of events like this one. So I'm really grateful for your interest. I'm very interested to hear what you have to say and offer whatever opinions I have, because I think we're moving into quite a dangerous place globally. Even the rhetoric around the Ukraine at the moment, the Parliament never stops at looking for an excuse to put down inflammatory motions and so on, while ignoring serious abuses and violations that go along globally. But on a positive note, I would say that their disconnect on foreign affairs is no more different than their disconnect on domestic affairs. And ordinary citizens across Europe are very dissatisfied with the way in which the the European Union is being run. I think we do have to take seriously the threat. I mean, when I was in the Irish Parliament, we could make these points and engage in dialogue without the vitriol that's there at present. Yet what we found is, since we've come to the European Union, only last week there was a huge attack on myself and my colleague in the Irish media, saying what a national embarrassment we were, and that the voters in Ireland should be aware that we had gone to Europe and that we were just, being lapdogs of Assad or Putin or China, and that we really were a total embarrassment, which comes from a media outlet which doesn't cover any of the work that we do, doesn't praise any of the sort of facts that we have and the files that we've worked on. They don't pay any interest in that, but that they can put out that nonsense without check and without reprimand just shows you the direction in which European societies are going. So unfortunately, I don't have all the answers to it, but I do know that engagement and dialogue and events like this are very much part of it, because we share a continent, we share a history, and any differences that are there or trying to improve global communication can only come out of mutual respect and dialogue, certainly not out of misinformation and hysteria that we have seen now. So thanks a million for the invite, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so very much. Claire, next time when you happens to come to Russia, yeah, we will be glad to have you here in Voronezh. If you have no plans to come to Russia, we may invite you so that you can come next, right here, to Voronezh State University, where we can talk more about all the issues you have mentioned. And could I possibly ask you, I know there are questions, I mean, there should be some, but could I be the first person to ask you if you believe in understanding? Do you think that it's possible, I mean, between the Europeans and the Russian governments or authorities or ruling parties, as you have called them?
Yeah, I mean, look, and obviously I would love to go to Russia anytime. So yeah, we'll try and fit that in kind of when COVID calms down a bit more. Look, I mean, I'm a very optimistic person. I have to be hopeful and believe that the good sense of people will prevail. But unfortunately, in some ways, history teaches us differently, and there are powerful vested interests at play. Now, that said, there are also, nobody wants a third world war, or nobody wants conflict. But unfortunately, dialogue and aggressive rhetoric, we can call it the new Cold War rhetoric, but it's actually quite hot. It's not actually cold at all. Can lead us to a difficult place. And for me, the situation now is a little bit more like things were before World War I than before World War II, because we have actually aggressive rivalries between world economies, most notably the US with China, and that's the dynamic behind the scenes. So that's incredibly dangerous. So all of which we can do is have to put our emphasis into diplomacy, difficult and all as it is. I mean, the United Nations has been pretty disappointing, but it's the only arena that we have, and we just have to fight to save it from itself, really, in many interests, and try and exploit every opportunity for dialogue. I think in a Russian context, there's probably more scope for dialogue between the individual member states than there is with the EU as a whole, which has kind of backed itself into this Russia-phobia corner without any content or economic interest to it. But they've kind of put themselves there, so it's harder for them to get out. But that's not the view of a lot of the member state governments even. I can see how that is nonsense for both the people and the economies in Russia and likewise in Europe. So we have to hope, but we have to be realistic that it is not easy either.
Thank you. Okay, are there any questions?
Yes, there are. Thank you so much for your speech. And I would like to ask a question, since we're talking about the state's influence on the opinion of European Union on Russia. What, in your opinion, is needed to get rid of this influence in shaping the European Union's policy towards Russia?
Very hard question, and there are no easy answers. I was struck by some of the contributions that I made in the European Parliament, and people contacting me from all across Europe saying, we never hear this view, like it's never said, like it's always just assumed that an anti-Russian rhetoric is a fact. So when you hear somebody saying the opposite, it can kind of stand out a bit. And I was really struck by the number of Irish people who live in Russia, who maybe have married a Russian or whatever, and talking about coming home to Ireland and how their children, the stories that they hear about the way in which Russia is covered in the Western media is so different than the lives that they live with their spouses in Russia that it's very hard for them to take over. So I suppose the answer to that is then we have to make the real life of what goes on in Russia more exposed to a Western outlet. And I think it's the power of that, which is why you see that being restricted and shut down and, you know, censored under the fallacy of, you know, disinformation and that, is because actually, if you put out that truth, most ordinary people will go, well, what's wrong with that? Like, sure, that's grand. There's nothing wrong with that. There's no demon out there. So we have to make Russian voices be heard more, and not just the official ones that European society tells us are the real Russians, but all Russian voices across the spectrum. But that isn't easy when you're dealing with, you know, a media in the West which is privately owned, which is hard for people to access, and then when outlets are being shut down under this veil of disinformation, which is becoming the new buzzword here. It's absolutely shocking what gets said unchallenged, without any evidence whatsoever, and that otherwise we would suppose intelligent people are regurgitating this nonsense as if it was a fact, their views being repeated by the mainstream media, and actually anybody who stands against that being demonized. So it's not easy. So the answer is making Russian voices heard, but how you do that is very difficult in the context of media ownership and so on. I suppose social media is a good start, but they are trying to shut down ways of that. But cultural exchanges and all of that, I think, will be important too.
Ну, во-первых, значит, буквально в течение 2 дней высылаем вам план. Завтра мы там подбиваем его. А сейчас вы не поверите.
Well, there is somebody's microphone
конференции.
that is on. Here we are.
Thank you so much for your answer.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes.
Okay, Andrei.
Thank you. It's a question about Russian and Europe relations again, but it's quite different. So what actions are needed to restore the European Union's confidence in Russia, and what steps Europe wait from Russia?
I didn't entirely hear that. If I got a bit of it, but not all of it. Sorry.
I can repeat. You hear me?
What kind of steps?
What actions are needed to restore the European Union's confidence in Russia, and which steps Europe wait from Russia to continue friendly relations?
To wait.
Okay, the connection isn't brilliant, but I think he said, like, what steps are needed to restore the European Union's confidence in Russia?
Yes.
I actually don't think that, I really don't believe that it's Russia's fault, you know, that this situation has originated. We read in the West that it is, that this is terrible, that we have, you know, well, I don't know where the aggression is supposed to manifest itself, because it certainly hasn't manifested itself anywhere in the EU. So in that context, is the problem that the European Union has lost confidence? I don't really see it. I see it more as a manufactured situation whereby a popular enemy now has been sort of implemented. I mean, look, there are difficulties with many of the border states, the former Soviet states, which are now in the European Union, which border Russia, are very problematic. I mean, they've moved from a situation of, you know, post-Stalinist era, 30 years, they are so-called democracies, whatever that is, because there are huge problems with corruption and mismanagement and a democratic deficit in those societies. But what makes them popular inside the European Union, and which avoids the scrutiny on their own domestic affairs, is if they give out about Russia, because the military-industrial complex likes that, because if you have an enemy, then you have to secure yourself against that enemy, and therefore they're the ones who are going to be making the money. So I do think the border states are the former Eastern European economies are difficult, because people in those countries believe that they were joining the European Union to build a better life, to improve their economic situation, to have more freedoms and so on. But the reality hasn't turned out like that for them. I mean, for many of them, you take a country like Bulgaria, a huge chunk of their people, 2 million of their people have emigrated. They've become a pool of cheap labor for the Western powers, whereby the Western economies, whereby then the ruling elites in those countries, many of them which came from the old regime anyway, are the ones pocketing the money from the European Union. So I think it's in their interest to stoke up this division. It's not in the interest of the people of Europe. So I think you have to identify the problem accurately before you come up with a solution. And I don't, unfortunately, have all of the solutions, but I don't think it's actually anything that Russia has done for per se. I think there are powerful vested interests behind stoking up these divisions. And I suppose the solution of it, to calm things down, is to try and fuel better integration, more diplomacy, more exchanges. But that is not easy, because, you know, we see it with the ratcheting up of sanctions and so on. Even in some ways, when it's not in the interests of European businesses to have these sanctions, they develop a life of their own and become a kind of a reality. So I do think sort of economic exchanges, common economic interest is important as well. But look, if these are difficult questions. If there was an easy answer, we probably wouldn't be having this forum. It's very difficult, and the world and Europe is in a dangerous place now, maybe more so than it has been for a very long time. I don't expect to see a third world war or anything like that, but could there be skirmishes? Could there be military action happening on a more serious level than before? Unfortunately, yes, that is possible, I think.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Yes, I've got a couple of questions.
Julia. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, speech. And first, I would like to ask, is it appropriate to think or to state that there is a certain level of dependency between European mass media and the US interests, political interests, economical interests, like it was with Men Van Joe case in 2018 and many others? Of course, you've mentioned a lot of that, but still, I'm not sure if we can freely say that there is this dependency or connection.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is. I think the European Union has been very Atlanticist in its outlook, even more so over the last period than before. That's not actually in the interests of the people of Europe. It's not even in the interests of the European Union economies. Actually, what the US has done is sort of stoked up a situation where US economic interests are being advanced and European ones aren't. Like, so we have, the process is complicated because there are divisions in the European Union as well. We see it on a military aspect between those who want to be fully embedded in NATO, those who want to see an independent European Union defence structure, and so on, those who want no part of that. But I do think there is a bit of a dependency, but not because there has to be, but because they've kind of chosen it to be so, and it wasn't always so. I mean, in some ways, they kind of say it was a reaction to Trump and that kind of thing. But I think now that Biden is back on and they say he's brought the US back, whatever that means, actually, it has continued. And despite the soft rhetoric, it's exactly the same. I mean, the good thing about Trump was he was the ugly version of what US imperialism is. He didn't hide it. That's what he was. That's what they are. Biden is the cuddly version of the same, which is more difficult. And the European Union has gone in behind that to say, oh, he's our man now. The US is back and we're behind that. So there is a dependency there, but it shouldn't have to be like that. But is it there? Yes, I think it very much is. But when you think about things like Nord Stream 2 and all of that, actually the economic interests of Europe and many of its member states will be much better served by linking up and cooperating economically with Russia than it would with listening to and bending the knee to some of this influence.
Thank you, Claire, again. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. So
Daria.
the question is, could you share your opinion? Why is Russia accused of involvement in the migration crisis related to the conflict with refugees on the borders of Belarus and Poland?
Yeah, I mean, my guess is as good as yours, but I mean, I would imagine because they have decided the demon and the evil influence everywhere is Russia. It doesn't matter that if there is no evidence for this. The fact is it's repeated and repeated and repeated. So as I said, there was a big feature in the Irish media during the week about what a national embarrassment we were for being, supporting President Putin or whatever, or being pro-Russian or whatever, when actually we haven't supported any government anywhere, including our own, and have simply argued for respect amongst all nations. So the Belarusian situation, I assume the prevailing mantra in the EU goes that Russia would support Lukashenko. The European Union doesn't, that Lukashenko is weaponizing migrants, and yes, he is, but he can only do that because the European Union countries on the borders are ignoring their obligations under international law and asylum. And therefore he's seen a weak point and he's gone and exploited it in the most horrible way, using people as sort of human cannon fodder. But it's the European Union that has allowed that by failing its obligations under international law. But I think it's because they have acknowledged the outcome of the Belarusian election. They don't recognize any sort of leaders in exile that we have, whereas the European Union do. Not only do they recognize them, but they bring them into the European Union week after week and give little talks. I find it actually quite embarrassing, their behavior. But look, I mean, a little bit like they acknowledged Juan Guaido in Venezuela, they've had to claw back from that situation now as well. But it's, I would say that that's why. If there's no evidence to it, it's just, it suits the prevailing narrative. But it is certainly the tension in the border states and the likes of Lithuania and Poland and so on, and the response to that situation has been unlawful by those states and horrific and racist, but yet all of the blame is put on Belarus, which they should get a big chunk of blame as well, but it's also put on Russia too without any necessary evidence at all.
Thank you so much again, Claire. Well, there's no evidence, I agree, but like the former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom used to say, it's highly likely. So we know that you can be blamed if there is no evidence, but it's highly likely. Are there any other questions? No, if there are no questions.
Well,
no, there is. I'm sorry, I cannot see your Igor.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so first, I would like to say thank you, Claire, for your speech. It was really interesting, and it is always interesting to listen to a person like a native European with it's you, yeah, and thanks our university for this meeting. So I think that it is really like profitably to have Russia as an enemy, and like the reason why NATO is still like really popular, because Russia is presented as an enemy. So and my question is, don't you think that to stop this situation, the Europe has to be more stronger and has to be has to stop being dependent from the US, like, and only in this way, like Russia can be friends, like when the Europe is strong enough. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, I do agree with that, but unfortunately, I would say my views are a kind of a minority, certainly in the European Parliament. On one level, I wouldn't get too upset by that, because the European Parliament is actually largely unrepresentative of the people of Europe. You know, they talk about fair elections in other countries, but actually the turnout in the European Parliament elections can be abysmal. Like in some countries, it is less than 30%. So the idea that the people in the European Parliament represent the people of Europe is not true. The Commission, a little bit more sensible in some ways, but very Atlanticist. And then you have the member states, the European Council and the countries. And you will see that where their interests are at stake, they are happy to have a friendly relations with Russia. And I do think that probably there is more where we will see the cracks in the European Union's Atlanticism and pro-US dependence beginning to unravel a little. Now, it takes time, and they put on a little bit of a collective front when they want, but I mean, everybody knows there are massive divisions inside the EU member states, not just on foreign policy, actually more so on a lot of domestic policy, economic policy, and that as well. So it is rife with division anyway. And I think in that context, yes, putting forward the view that Europe needs to stand alone, it's a view that we put forward all the time, that Europe should have its own interests. It shouldn't be pinned to anybody, just put forward its own interests and work with everybody. It doesn't matter who, all countries, including the US, you know, work with everybody, be open to everybody. But sadly, at the moment, that's not the majority viewpoint, but I think it's more likely to be developed by the Council rather than the Parliament in the short term. But as I say, don't ever be upset about anything that the European Parliament does. It's a crazy place, and half them are completely mental from what I can make out. They're definitely not representative of a lot of people.
Thank you. Okay, there's one more question from Ala.
Yes.
Ala?
My name is Ala Kulshin, International Office of Voronezh State University. Thank you, Claire, for possibility to discuss with our students. Firstly, I would like also invite you to our online and offline event in Voronezh. We are planning to organize European Week in next May, and we'll be happy to communicate with you and invite you to this event. And I have some questions. Unfortunately, EU Parliament is not very favorable to Russia. For example, latest report of Foreign Committee on Euro relations, where Russia is seen as security threats. I would like to ask you about your opinion of this report and this position, and also maybe rhetoric questions as a pro-Russian voice in the EU Parliament of you.
I mean, it's quite incredible, the scale of the delusion in the European Parliament. And I mean, just if you're feeling bad, it's not just targeted at Russia. I mean, if you were Chinese now, you'll be seriously in trouble, because they've gone completely crazy in terms of their anti-Chinese rhetoric. And let's remember, like, China is their biggest trading partner, like, you know, they give out about Chinese militarism, but like the Chinese military expenditure is growing, but from a tiny base. Like, they give out about the Chinese influence in the China Sea, which is beside them. It's nothing got to do with Europe, but they don't see the irony in that. So, I mean, I don't see Russia as a security threat. I mean, I remember in one of the meetings of security and defense early on, when their latest project now is this strategic compass. So it's the way forward for European defense. And we're all supposed to have a common view of a common threat and a common security interest. But of course, they don't. They all have loads of different ideas about what the threat is, and the member states actually can't agree on a common threat. But I made the point at one of the meetings saying, like, people go on about, like, that the Eastern European countries go on all about Europe being Russia being a threat. I said, well, people in Ireland don't see Russia as a threat. And then one of the Polish people turned around to me and savaged me, and he said, well, that's easy for you to say. I mean, you're not on the border of Russia like us, you know. But my answer to that was, well, actually, it's not easy for me to say that. I said, we come from a country on the other side of Europe, which was occupied for 800 years by British imperialism. So is your answer to that we should get the IRA back and we should have a war of terror again against the Brits? Or because I'm worried about the British? So what's your answer? Of course it isn't. So you want Russian aggression? No, there's no way out of it. You've got to sit down and deal diplomatically with your neighbours in adherence and respect for international law. Now, in fairness to Russia, it has been pushing and trying to defend international law on the world stage. But sadly, international law is under massive attack globally. It really is. It's frightening, actually, how much that has taken. So for me, that's the biggest security threat, is how much international law is being undermined at the moment. I don't see it as a security threat. I think there are vested interests in parts of Europe that are stoking this up. But the sad thing about that is that fantasy can become a reality if a little bit of, you know, a loose word or a bad gesture suddenly becomes inflamed, and it takes you know, a momentum of its own. So it's worrying. I don't want to overstate that, but it is worrying. So, I mean, we just have to continue dialogue like this. We have to hope that the interaction at government level between some of the member states will make us see sense, and that on a world stage, some of the other economies, particularly the likes of China, and that sort of try and, you know, row in for a steadiness. But Europe is not in a good place, for sure. And by that I mean the EU and Russia, the continent of Europe is a dangerous place, and it's been fueled by interests outside our continent, you know, and they won't be the ones suffering if something happens, you know.
Thank you. Thank you again. And I think that it's time. Thank you so very much, Claire. And we hope that, well, now we know that it's in May. I mean, the international conference or whatever it is called, Ala, that we hope that you will join us. You will be here. Now I would like to give a word to Yulia Belyayeva, one of the students, intergraduates of Voronezh State University, the Faculty of Modern Languages. Yulia, I know that you have an opinion.
Yeah, probably the one with Assange we've already covered, and it's pretty close to the one Claire presented here. I'm very much agree with everything you've just said. If you don't mind, I would like to proceed to the issue with RT Deutsch.
RT Deutsch.
Yes.
Okay. What is the abbreviation? RT, what does it stand for?
Russia Today, I think everyone
just in case
knows it.
No, just in case, okay?
Sure. So I see this as another clear example of censorship, actually. So we are going to discuss it today, and this is the case of YouTube deleting RT Deutsch. The channel was blocked on the 21st of September and then completely deleted on the 28th of September for violating its COVID misinformation policy. And I personally haven't seen the video, and it's unlikely that we'll ever see it again, what makes the case even more provocative. So some mainstream sources like Deutsche Welle find it reasonable and highlight no undercover purpose of banning RT Deutsch. Another point of view, however, represents by less popular German publishers, and it states that this case is a true violation of free speech because it draws our attention to the facts. RT Deutsch was blocked right before Germany's parliamentary voting, and being one of the most popular news resources in both Germany and German-speaking communities, RT Deutsch had a certain share of influence there. So that definitely leaves some food for thought. And should we see it as a coincidence, or we are dealing with unreasonable censorship in this case? And I think I would like to...
Is it a question?
Yeah, it's like a rhetorical one. Yeah, I think here we can give the floor to Ulrich Hayden, the German journalist.
Ah, okay. So that was really a question, and that was a question to Ulrich Hayden, a German journalist working closely with not only RT Deutsch, but also with Telepolis and Rubicon and other. Well, Ulrich is a writer and a filmmaker. Ulrich has come to Voronezh State University last year, and he's a friend of us. So, what is yours, Ulrich? What would you like to say?
Yes, I thank you for invitation. I have prepared some words about this case, RT Deutsch, which called now RTDE, a new brand. And this is for Germany really important because never we had such a situation that the first initiative to make a Russian Russian media, big television media in Germany has such problems. And so I want to introduce with some historical of this RT Deutsch, how it began. RTDE started its work in 2014. It started as an internet portal for video and articles from scratch. A video platform in which Russian views of the world is disseminated in German did not exist in Germany until then. RTDE, but now this is a new name now, quickly became known because it presented at other points of view on Ukraine crisis and the war in Donbass. While the German mainstream media claimed that Russia and Putin were to blame for the war in Donbass, many new internet platforms, not only RT Deutsch, become to work, like Nachdenkseiten, Rubicon, and one left newspaper Junge Welt. They, on the other hand, they blamed the West for the coup d'etat and the war in Ukraine. In 2014, the German mainstream media began to remove alternative positions and points of view from their programs even more than before. RTDE filled this gap with brilliance, and other alternative media also. There was a lot of demand because the monotonous reporting on the authoritarian Russian president, the freedom hero Navalny, the alleged Novichok victim Sergei Skripal, and alleged poison gas attacks by Assad in Syria sparked interest in information from the other side. RTDE made highly professional. A wide range of German opinions were voiced, from the head of the police union, a German general, a former German ambassador in Moscow, to politicians from the left party, Die Linke, and the right-wing populist party, Alternative for Germany. RTDE became one of the most popular German video channels. As you already said, the YouTube channel of RTDE was closed on 28th of September, 2 days after the German elections. At the time, the channel had 600,000 subscribers and more than 500 million hits. I mean, it's only the German part of Russia today. There are other parts, French and Spanish and English. RTDE has been trying to obtain a broadcast license for a television station in Germany since it was founded. As a result, RT rented large office space in Berlin district Adlershof. Now it finally seems to have been done on December 16, so it's in some days. RTDE is scheduled to start a satellite television program. The staff has therefore been increased over the past few months. Since RTDE was founded, there has been a massive campaign against the Russian portal from RT in the German media. In the German mainstream media, it is a good form to distance oneself from RTDE and to speak and write about the Russian president in an ironic, hateful, or even aggressive tone almost every day. The accusation is RTDE wants to destabilize Germany, sow distrust, intensify contradictions by offering German right-wing populists, esoterics, fascists, and corona deniers a platform. The alleged proof: RTDE published streams on which demonstrations by migrant and vaccination opponents in Germany and yellow vests in France can be seen. Mainstream television does not broadcast such streams in Germany. In the autumn of this year, the German mainstream media also claimed that RTDE was trying to influence the federal elections. In my opinion, the worldview of German mainstream journalists, I was also a part of these mainstream journalists till 2014, is simply undemocratic. RTDE is denied the right to provide a stage for harsh critics of German politics. At the same time, the German mainstream media take for granted the right to constantly quote sharp Putin critics from the Russian liberal camp. And we have in Moscow 3 big studios from German television, ARD, ZDF, Deutsche Welle, and they work again and again. RTDE has been demonized by the German mainstream media. It was pretended that some secret things were happening there in Berlin, in this studio, and that the RT editor-in-chief in Berlin got his instructions from the Kremlin over the phone every day. Former employees of RT who later criticized the station, or journalists who came into the station, RT Germany, in the hope to bring later sensational news from the inside of RT to the public, were welcome guests in German mainstream television. But what about the people in Germany who link RTDE posts on Facebook or Twitter, or who dare to defend RTDE's article or videos in public debates? These people need courage and thick skins, because accusations and spite are guaranteed. The German mainstream media are claiming that what RTDE does is not journalism. Mainstream journalists and politicians from large parties strictly refuse to discuss about the content of the text and the videos on RTDE. On the one hand, the mainstream pretends that RTDE does not exist as a journalistic product. On the other hand, all activities of RT are suspiciously observed, and whenever something goes wrong at RT, malicious joy is voiced loudly. It's actually like kindergarten. One day after the federal election, in which the party Die Linke lost votes and is therefore now represented in the Bundestag with fewer MPs, the Russia expert of the Berlin Tagesspiegel, Claudia von Salzen, tweeted, quote, "Alexander Neu, from the party Die Linke, no longer belongs to the next Bundestag. RT Deutsch has to look for a new expert." End of quote. RT Deutsch's plan to become not just a video portal, but a television broadcaster has so far failed. RTDE did not get a broadcast license in Germany. The alleged reason was that RTDE is not independent of the Russian state. It has been argued that German television broadcasters are independent of the state. But in Germany, the opinion spread on television mostly coincides with the opinion of the government. The independence of mainstream television in Germany is limited to the fact that the costs of the German public television are collected from television viewers via fees. After the rejection in Germany, RTDE tried to get a broadcast license in Luxembourg, which also failed. So we have already spoke about the shutdown of RT on YouTube. The reason was 4 videos about COVID-19 and a video about negative consequences of vaccination. The RT boss Margarita Simonian was not surprised about the deletion of RTDE on YouTube. RTDE had already problems finding German banks with which to do business. Simonian said Germany declared the media war on Russia. The RT boss expressed the expectation that Moscow will react with consequences against Deutsche Welle and the offices of the German channels ARD and ZDF in Moscow. But the German television studios in Moscow continue to work as before. In response to a question of Simonian at the Valdai Forum, Putin said, one would have to be careful with countermeasures. The German weekly magazine Der Spiegel rejected Simonian's accusation that a media war was being waged against RTDE. Spiegel correspondent Christian Esch wrote, alluding to Simonian's statement with black humor, quote, Germany has once again covered Russia with a war this week. Like a joke. The Spiegel correspondent wrote, it is not correct for the Russian Foreign Ministry to claim the German government silently supports the deletion of RTDE on YouTube. Such an assertion cannot be substantiated at all. And he wrote, Simonian's demand to punish the German media in Moscow for deleting RT in Germany is unjust because Google's decision has nothing to do with Germany. Strange. The Spiegel correspondent in Moscow does not say a word about the fact that the private company Google decides what German media users are allowed to see on YouTube and what not. The journal magazine Der Spiegel does not see the power of Google as a threat to freedom of the press in Germany. Patrick Gensing from the editorial team of the German Tagesschau wrote in an article that RTDE gave the quote the keywords for corona deniers and vaccination opponents. RT videos often contained misleading or false claims about COVID-19, mostly in the form of statements by, quote, dubious professionals who have not been reviewed or classified. End of quote. This allegation is not true. The keywords do not come from RT, but from Germans who question the corona measures. At RTDE, immunologists, doctors, and activists have their say. It is claimed that RTDE gave the K-word. It is assumed that the criticism of corona measures in Germany is something that has been brought into Germany from outside, similar to a virus. The headline of Patrick Gensing's article is, quote, a virus of mistrust. But how you can, as a journalist, in a democracy equate? But how you can, as a journalist, in a democracy equate the word mistrust with a virus? Isn't that the language of the Cold War in the 50s of the last century, when communist agents were suspected everywhere, and the Communist Party of Germany was banned by the federal court? Doesn't this language remind you at the 70s of the last century, when thousands of teachers and other civil servants lost their jobs in Germany because they were members of the Communist Party? So I've already speak about other media which founded on 2014 when the war in Ukraine began in Germany. It's not only RT Deutsch, but which started in this year, also other media which financed about support of ordinary people. Many people who already stopped their work, they are pensioners, they began to work like journalists again. They spent money, make videos. They organized journeys to Donetsk, Lugansk. They organized humanitarian aid. And I know one woman in Leipzig, in Thüringen, East Germany. She already, I think, 25th big trucks with medicine care, with tools for children, and all it's shares of German hospitals without any cost, but you must pay for the transport costs only. And people are able already 3-4 years they organize this transport for the people in Donbass, in the People Republic. So you see in Germany is really people who are able to organize alternative information, alternative help, and this is the good thing. And so with these words, I will finish my speech.
Thank you so very much. And again, Ulrich, can I ask you, I'll be the first one to ask you a question. Why do you think, what is your opinion, RT Deutsch was banned? We know the official position, but what is your opinion?
My opinion is that America has very big weight in European politics and in Germany. This is a fact, and we have already in Germany 2 or 3 generations which were educated from American foundations, and they don't know the Russian culture, they only know the English culture, the American culture, and these American aggressive fraction, they want to isolate and demonize Russia, and they don't even want even want a television channel to block. I mean, we only don't speak only from the contact between people, and this is but the television channel is for them like a, I don't know, like a devil, something like the devil. No, because you can see what say the Russians said, what are their impressions. You can compare what the Brussels said, what Berlin said. The normal German can prove, and this proof is a normal political process, normal democratic process, and we see that. The last 7 years, they want to stop all normal dialogue, all normal democratic process between Russia and the West, and this is yes, very, very, very bad. And
This is yep, thank you. Are there any questions?
Oh,
May
sorry, I want to.
Yeah, sorry, yes,
I want to
yes.
one idea.
Uh-huh.
I want to say that I saw in Russia many generations of correspondence. I work in Moscow already since '92, and I had the feeling that many older correspondents, they were in pension or they have no influence now, and they become new generations. Often they are not very known of. They have not very much knowledge about Russian history, and they change every time these correspondents, and so there are no people now. Less and less people who live in Russia, who speak Russian, who knows the Russian history, and even this correspondent is totally anti-Putin, for example. He is even such a person is something like a bridge. You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
But when is nobody, and the number of correspondents get less and less, then you have you don't know what is Russia. I mean, how many regions, which parties, which leading politicians, all these normal facts you need to know from a country is not known now in Germany, only from a small group of experts. And I mean, this is a basic for military action. I think if you demonize, isolate a country totally, you can make what you want, because in this part of the world living only Putin, Navalny, and nobody else.
And the bears. Reindeer and the bears. Okay, thank you. So, are there any questions to Uli?
Yeah, there is one question from me.
Anastasia.
Yeah, so we were talking about the banning of RT Deutsch, and do you think that this was like a precedent case, or this is there is a threat of banning like RT in different countries for political reasons?
Don't you think that RTDE will also be, or it is destined to be banned? Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
I don't think so, because it is an historical fact that it's sadly to say for me, because I came from West Germany, from Hamburg, and the west part of Germany even is more anti-Russian now media, as for example east part of Germany. There is more understanding for Russia, and many people in many countries, for example France or Greece or Serbia, or I mean Italy. When I was in Italy, I was in a hotel, and oh, you came from Russia, oh Putin. No, I mean, in total another feeling I had a feeling that West part of Germany is really, it's sad to say it, but more anti-Russian, and so I mean Google and YouTube is an American company, and they can do what they want. But I mean, to go totally against the opinion of the people of other European countries, it's also not so easy. I mean, if you do too much in this direction, it's not the best reputation for America, I think, and for the globalization and for this model of politics.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are you satisfied, Nastya?
Yeah, fully.
All right. Okay. So, Ekaterina or Katya looks like she wants to ask a question. Ekaterina? No? Ekaterina.
Well, I do want to ask the question.
I'm sorry. What's your name?
Yulia.
Yulia. Oh, Yulia. Yes, here we are. Okay.
Yes. So, Ulrich, to continue the topic you've just raised about YouTube and Google, notice they have such demands that content that contains false claims or the error that accidentally affected the outcome of the voting, like it was in USA before, should be deleted from YouTube. And previously, it was only deposed onto the issues of American votings, but recently they also imposed it onto federal elections in Germany, like this parliamentary voting in 2021. Do you see this issue as the one that German government should probably, or German press should probably care more about, or they just can't do anything about these demands of YouTube or Google?
I don't think so. At first, I have the impression that this idea that Russia interfere in the elections in United States till now have no really, I mean, it's not grounded, and even after many years, we have no facts about this, and the idea to bring this thema for Germany also, I mean, only I think some weeks before our elections, on the 26th of September, it was for me really astonishing. I really didn't expect this. I never heard before, and I had the feeling it's only some political technology, something very strange, artificial. Make some scandal without any, and there's really no. I mean, if you look on the Bundestag, okay, we had a case, for example, some 1-2 people from deputies from the Alternative from Germany. They were accused that they had a very near relation to the Kremlin, and they were really often in Russia. Taking part in some political events in Russia, but it was 3 years ago, these cases, and they had no. I mean, it's very strange in Germany. I mean, you look in this parliament. You have the right-wing Alternative für Deutschland. They are perhaps one of the most clear opponents of sanctions against Russia. You have the left party, also oppositional, but the left party is already divided, and there's only some people of left party are really against this Russophobia, and all other parties are mainly Christian Democrats, Social Democrats, and also mostly Liberal Democrats. They are also for sanctions and demand every day something new from Putin. And there is no reason to say there is an influence. I mean, you have no example for this influence of Russia or some agents in the Bundestag. I don't know. Or everything's under control. There's nothing to criticize.
Thank you very much again. And I wonder if there are any other questions, the questions that you haven't asked yet.
I have a question.
Not Daria. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what do you think about foreign agents law in Russia, and does it violate the freedom of speech or it defends it?
I know that in America is also this law and also this duty to sign your publications if you are a Russian organization in America. And this is, I'm not happy about this law, but I know and I see that some organizations try to they acted like make propaganda for the Western ideals, the Western form of living, and this is not good, I think. I mean, I know they're very good organizations. They stand up for reform in Russian prisons and humanitarian things and aid for ill people, and I mean very important work. And I've seen this declaration of or paper of the Russian party, Justice for Russia, or how you in Russia, Spravedliva Россия, and they said if you want to punish иностранный agent, you can only do it over the judge. I think this is very important, and because somebody get from the foreign country, I think 2,000 euro or 5,000 euro, and it's really the question: he's already a agent. I mean, this is I think this is too hard and too. And I mean, this is already, if you use this law too strict, and you can destroy the small bridges of connection we have, and this is really dangerous, I think. And I mean, we have so much control in Russia. I don't think we had not enough control. I mean, especially political control, and so I'm not a fan of this law. I know this America also have this law, but I hope that this law. I'm not against this law, but I hope this law will not use like a method to shut all mouths of critic.
Thank you.
Thanks. And again, our last call for questions. If they're ready, say or Andrei.
Thank you for your speech. It was very interesting. So, as I said before, RT Deutsch was banned not only because of Europe government of Europe countries think that Russia is aggressive, but because of some hate reports from left liberals. So, do you see any connections with the left liberal paradigm? Because in the United States, when was elections, all Republicans have the same problems, and even Twitter of President of the United States was banned just because it's unpleasant to left liberals elites.
Again, there's a question. What is your concrete question? Again.
Do you see any connection with the domination of left liberal paradigm in political sphere nowadays?
Connected with RT Deutsch or with?
Yeah, this situation, from my point of view, is connected with the domination of left liberals in political sphere and elections in the United States and ban of lots of politicians in Europe only prove it.
Yes, I mean these words, liberal and left, these words stand for me traditional for other things. I mean, we have in Germany liberals, for example, there were social liberals. There were really fighters for the civil rights, and left is for me also not what you think now. What is left? Left is now. Do you think this is? We fight for freedom of Navalny and for against Putin. I mean, left is for me especially fight for social justice and against war. And in this direction, the German left, for example, is very poor, very not active, and this is really a big discussion also in Germany. We have Sarah Wagenknecht. She said the left party is went in a wrong direction. They only worked on the agenda of minorities. I mean, LGTB and against racism. Okay, this is important, but I mean, the left party is a party, a mass party, a people's party, and we have in Germany 80 million people, and 80,000 million people, and how you can make such a small bridge only. You must be anti-racist, you must be speak the really good gender language, and you must be sympathizing with minorities, and only then you are left liberal, a good person. I mean, this is not democratic, this is not social, this is a very wrong way, I think. And I have the impression that some people behind the curtain, they managed that our parties in Germany, which were oppositional parties, they became parties from they are not now oppositional. They take part in the anti-Russian propaganda. They lost the opposition attitude, and very strange. Very strange.
Thank you again. And I think it's the right time we prepared this summary. Are there any volunteers? Is there anybody who can sum up the whole speech, the whole event?
Okay, I'm not sure.
So there is a person.
Yeah,
Julia.
Yeah, I think it's a bit over-consistent, but still. So basically, freedom of speech and expression has always been a burning issue for journalism in the world and in Russia as well. So, and when it comes to democratic approach of presenting news, we tend to look up to European media. And recently, however, there is numerous publications that raise an issue of Russia being negatively painted in the mainstream European media. And this particular issue actually inspired our today's discussion. And nowadays, the problems we observe concern not only positioning Russia for the European audience as an enemy, but also subjecting those who want to shed some light onto these issues to a consistent censorship. And we've already discussed the issues with Julian Assange, who might be sentenced to 175 years in the US prison. And I personally, and I believe many of us, find this issue inhumane and completely against freedom of speech. So also we discussed, just now we discussed the situation with RT Deutsch and all the consequences it brought with itself. So I believe that today we covered lots of topics, and the thing we want to ask today, just right after this meeting, is whether we still should look up to Europe when it comes to freedom of speech and to the independent journalism. Are these issues the examples of censorship or just media ignorance? And should we draw some parallels between the media pressure on Russia and the predictions in Europe itself? So that's probably it.
Yeah, but what about understanding? We have tried to talk over if understanding is possible. I mean, understanding between the Europeans and the Russian, and if we have this common ground that we're searching for. What about this one, Julia?
Well, I believe we do have some common ground, of course, otherwise we wouldn't have this conference today. And we've got lots of great journalists, for example, like our. But I believe that today's situation seems really dangerous, and not only because we've got NATO issues to discuss, we've got Ukrainian issues to discuss, but because the influence of mass media is too strong, and I'm not sure nowadays that we can change it completely. Maybe people are just going to get tired of all those bulks of information, bulks of pressure against Russia, and then start thinking themselves.
And also, may I add, as Claire mentioned, answering to my question, that to get this understanding between European Union and Russia, we should have our Russian voices heard. And this is only possible in transparent conditions, and unfortunately, it is really difficult and almost impossible to get these conditions. So because of this censorship, we cannot be heard. And that's why we don't have this understanding.
Nastya, but you do believe that it's possible, don't you?
Yeah, in the further future, maybe one day we will see this understanding.
All right. Thank you so very much for the participation of all of the students and the professionals who have joined us. Let me say that it was inspired. I mean, the whole idea of such a meeting was inspired by the students of the Faculty of Modern Languages. And let me now ask you if you think that this initiative should go on, and we may meet again, say in 2022.
Yes, I support it. I'm ready to take part again.
Okay. Oleg thinks it's a good idea. Say if it's a good idea. Okay.
And we agree with this statement that it's a good idea, because it's really inspiring for us, to get this, to shape our own opinions on these situations, because it's really hard, because, with all of this information flow nowadays, it's really hard to form like an outstanding opinion. And the speakers today shown us that you can be, against this whole propaganda and form your own opinion on, for example, Russia, if we were talking today about Russian-European relationship.
All right. Yes, thank you. Thank you, and I hope that the rest of you agree, that we have found this discussion really thought-provoking, fruitful, and we hope that next time we meet, if we meet in 2022, the conditions might change. Let's put it that way, mild way, might change. We hope they may change. Thank you again. Thank you to Claire and Ulrich for all those students who have come. And see you, well, next time. I mean, as for those who major in their masters in linguistics, I see you next week. Yep, Tuesday next week, the same time. As for the rest of you, bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, Ulrich.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.